the current committee chair. We are holding this meeting virtually due to the current public health emergency. This meeting is being held using Microsoft Teams and will be streamed live to the public. The public will be able to view the meeting from the Commission's website, and the meeting will be closed captioned. A video of this meeting will be provided on our website in accordance with the Open Meetings Act requirements. Just some things to put out there at the beginning of the meeting in terms of ground rules. We would ask that all microphones be muted and that you hold all questions or comments until the end of each presentation. If you have a question or comment, please use the chat box to relay your questions. Charlotte will be monitoring the chat box, and we will call your name in order after the presentation so that your question can be asked. If you are calling in by phone, please also announce your name when speaking so that we can identify who is asking the question or providing the comment. If you are on the phone right now and you need to mute or unmute yourself, please use *6. As always, the public was invited to submit written comments on any agenda item that we have today up to 24 hours prior to the meeting. Those comments, if received, will be read by the Commission staff at the appropriate time. And I believe I heard that we do have a quorum. Is that correct?
Yeah, Sandy, I can do a roll call really quick.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yep. Okay, so Commissioner Hertz is here. Commissioner Biola, I believe, announced himself earlier.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Grant, I believe I saw her. Commissioner Laird. Don't believe I saw him. Commissioner Mahoney announced himself earlier.
I'm here.
Thank you. Commissioner Mangum, I don't know if he is. No, Commissioner Mangum. Commissioner McCall.
Good morning.
Commissioner McCarthy, I believe he announced himself earlier.
Yes, I am here.
Thank you. Commissioner McDowell.
Present.
Thank you. Commissioner Parker.
I'm here.
Thank you. Commissioner Roberson, I believe just signed on.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Commissioner Sutton, I don't believe he is here. And Commissioner Varney Alvarado.
Yes, I'm here.
Great.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will go ahead and get started with our agenda items then. Before I announce the first one, I just want to point out that there is a typo on your agenda. It should read MDOT Maryland Transit Administration, not Authority. Sorry, Dan, there was no promotion there. I see you on the call. So with the first presentation, Alex DeWeese will cover their Riverside Shop Heavy Maintenance Building project.
Thank you, Chair Hertz. I will start my slideshow in a second. All right, good morning. Again, my name is Alex DeWeese, and I'll be presenting Maryland Transit Administration's Riverside Shop Heavy Maintenance Building this morning. We do have representatives from MTA with us today to participate in any discussion or questions that come up. So the project is proposed in Baltimore City, which is highlighted on the map in red. The project requires Commission review under COMAR 270205 state agency actions resulting in development on state-owned lands. It doesn't meet the requirements of the MOU exhibit that we have between CAC and MTA because it exceeds both the 5,000 square foot limit for disturbance as well as the 1,200 square foot limit for building size. So that's why you're seeing it today. So the project site is located at 1600 Ludlow Street between Key Highway, Fort Avenue, and I-95. The site is kind of this shark tooth shaped property here. It's about 5.5 acres in size, 4.5 of which are located in the critical area and designated as intensely developed area. As you can see, the site includes multiple buildings, as well as train tracks related to the Maryland Area Regional Commuter Train, also known as the MARC train. The proposed maintenance building is approximately where this red star is on the map, and it will allow MTA to maintain its locomotive and passenger cars on its property rather than shipping cars off-site and relying on external contractors. So this is just a zoomed in aerial photo of the site. You can see that it's essentially entirely impervious with the exception of this grassy and treed area on the right-hand side. There will be no impacts to the vegetation. The work involves demolishing existing building 6 right here and replacing it over some of the footprint of existing building 6, but also extending to the right with a 103 by 305 foot building that contains a wheel truing machine, an overhead crane, and a drop table. The proposed work also includes minor track realignment and underground utilities, all of which are associated with the new building, and the LOD for the entire project is 3.9 acres. So your staff report should include the site plan that's on the screen. We're a little zoomed in. It's pretty straightforward. So again, this right here, the smaller rectangle is existing building 6 to be demolished. The building outlined in dark gray is the proposed building. A submerged gravel wetland to the south of the building, so this triangular area here, is also proposed on site. And the construction of the wetland will also lead to a reduction in impervious surfaces of about 0.15 acres. The wetland will also provide a phosphorus reduction of 1.37 pounds per year, which exceeds their 10% stormwater management requirement. The proposed development has no impact on any buffer, tidal or non-tidal wetlands either, as none exist on site. And regarding the climate resiliency component required of state agency projects, there are no anticipated impacts because the site is well outside of all floodplains, as well as areas anticipated to be impacted by sea level rise and storm surge. Regarding reviews and permits by other agencies, MDE has approved concept plans for stormwater and sediment and erosion control. Final approval is pending. The Wildlife and Heritage Service has confirmed that there are no records of any rare, threatened, or endangered species. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has also indicated no endangered species or hatcheries in the project vicinity. MHT has determined that there are no adverse effects on historic properties, and public notice was published in the Baltimore Sun on September 2nd and posted on site. No comments have been received. Staff recommends approval of the proposed project with the following condition. Prior to the start of construction, MDOT/MTA shall submit a copy of all final plans, permits, and approvals, including stormwater management plans and MDE stormwater and erosion and sediment control authorizations to Commission staff. And with that, if there aren't any questions, I will turn it back over to the chair.
I just want to confirm with Charlotte, were there any questions put into the chat?
There are not.
All right. Do any of the commissioners have questions for Alex regarding the project? Jennifer has her hand raised. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I'm sorry, that was an accident.
Oh, I was all excited. I was going to get to hear a question today. Is anybody else on the call from the commissioner's staff or the commissioners having any questions for either MTA or Alex? I believe Dan Riegel from MTA is on the call as well. Then I will ask for a motion to approve, consistent with the staff report that Alex just went through.
Tammy Robertson, motion to approve.
Thank you, Tammy. Can I get a second?
Caroline will second the motion.
You can give that to Caroline.
Okay, thank you.
Either one, it's okay.
So we have a second from Caroline Varney Alvarado. And that brings us to our next agenda item. We have Kate Durant up, and she will be presenting MDOT.
Hey,
for the
Sandy.
Maryland. Yes.
Sandy, this is Emily Vanieri. Sorry.
Okay.
Can you call for a vote? Did I miss it?
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Every time.
It's all right. No problem.
Sorry. We have a call for a motion and a second from two of our commissioners. At this point, I would like to call for a vote on the MDOT MTA Riverside Shop project. I will assume all of those are in favor, but if there are any that are abstaining, please indicate now. Or if there are any that are opposed, please indicate now. Otherwise, we will assume approval. That was very backwards of me, but thank you all for voting. And it looks like we have a motion to approve. Okay. Emily, is that all right? Thumbs up from Emily.
Yeah, that's okay. If you want to, because we have a small group for the next one, if you want to actually have people unmute and say aye, that's totally fine.
Okay.
It's up to you.
All right. The second project we have today is going to be presented by Kate Durant. It's the Maryland Transportation Authority's Bay Bridge Vehicle Maintenance Facility, new office building, and maintenance building replacement located in Anne Arundel County. Kate?
Thank you, Commissioner Hertz. Okay, let's see. Good morning. I am Kate Durant, and I will be presenting the Maryland Transportation Authority, or MDTA, Bay Bridge Vehicle Storage Building Replacement and New Office Building Project. Ben Spencer is the consultant working on the project, and he is joining us for the meeting. So this project, forgive me for 1 second, is located in Anne Arundel County, in the approximate location of this star on the western side of the Bay Bridge, along Oceanic Drive. So the project location is right where the pointer is located. As you can see on this critical area map, the critical area designation for the site is intensely developed area, shown here in the red circle, or IDA, and then the proposed mitigation area is just north of the project site, shown here with the green circle in the limited development, or sorry, in the resource conservation area, RCA. And the project site, which we'll see a little bit closer on the next slide, is 3.03 acres. So here is a slide showing the project site. MDTA is proposing to construct a new office building and demolish and replace an existing maintenance building. This project requires commission approval because it does not qualify for approval under MDTA's existing general project MOU with the critical area, because it includes construction of a building that is not on the list of permitted types, as well as tree clearing that exceeds 1,000 square feet. This project also requires conditional approval by the commission because the proposed permanent disturbance in the buffer, shown here, is not water dependent. The existing lot coverage in the critical area is 0.73 acres, and the proposed lot coverage is 0.38 acres for a total lot coverage of 1.11 acres after the project is completed. Also, MDTA is proposing 2,758 square feet of permanent buffer disturbance and 8,873 square feet of tree canopy clearing outside of the buffer of stormwater management, best management practices, or BMPs. The existing maintenance building will be replaced in the same location, but the first floor elevation will be raised, and the new office building will also have a raised first floor elevation. On this slide, you can see the areas shaded in green here and here show the location of the tree canopy clearing and the submerged gravel wetlands, or for the submerged gravel wetlands, which are located adjacent to them. And then the area shaded in yellow down here shows the location of the permanent buffer disturbance for the microbiome retention basin. And this blue line shows the limit of the critical area buffer. MDTA has indicated that these best management practices, or stormwater BMPs, are necessary to fulfill Maryland Department of the Environmental Site Design stormwater management treatment requirements. So the proposed mitigation is located approximately 1,700 feet north of the project site. So the area outlined in yellow shows the mitigation location, and down where my pointer is right now is the approximate location of the actual project. The mitigation location is located along US 301. It's adjacent to the Bay Bridge Easy Pass Stop-In Center and Mesick Pond. Mitigation for buffer impacts will be provided at a 3-to-1 ratio for 8,274 square feet, and mitigation for tree clearing outside of the buffer will be provided at a 1-to-1 ratio for 8,873 square feet. The total required mitigation is 17,147 square feet. The buffer management plan that MDTA submitted provides 16,800 square feet of mitigation, and commission staff recommends that the commission request an additional 347 square feet of planting, either on site or at the proposed planting location. This proposed project is required to meet the Critical Area Commission's 10% phosphorus reduction requirements. So MDTA calculated that the annual removal requirement is 1.04 pounds of phosphorus per year. And the proposed stormwater management BMPs will remove 1.57 pounds of phosphorus per year for an excess of 0.53 pounds of phosphorus per year. MDTA has requested to bank their water quality credit with MDE, and MDTA is also asking the commission to allow them to use excess 10% credit towards that remaining 347 square feet of tree canopy mitigation that I mentioned on the previous slide. Commission staff recommends denial of this request because the buffer mitigation is required due to MDTA locating a stormwater management feature in the buffer. And on to state agency comments. The stormwater management concept plan was approved on August 6th, 2020. And the sediment and erosion control plan approval is pending. It should be a part of the final authorization of the stormwater management plan from MDE. The Department of Natural Resources, Wildlife and Heritage Service determined that there are no records of any state or federal rare, threatened, or endangered species within the project area. The Maryland Historical Trust determined that there are no historic properties in the project area. A trust resource review on the United States Fish and Wildlife Service website indicated that there are no U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service listed and endangered species, refuges, or fish hatcheries in the vicinity of the project. State agencies who are proposing development activities on state-owned lands need to demonstrate that they have considered the likelihood of sea level rise inundation, and that the project incorporates climate resilient practices in order to avoid or minimize environmental or structural damage associated with a coastal hazard, an extreme weather event, sea level rise, and other coastal impacts. So we have a few slides talking about coastal resiliency coming up. Also, this project is subject to the Maryland Coast Smart construction program. So this first coastal resiliency slide shows sea level rise, specifically mapping for the 0 to 2 and 2 to 5 feet of sea level rise. The 0 to 2 feet of sea level rise is shown in the lighter blue color, while the 2 to 5 feet of sea level rise is shown in the darker blue color. And as you can see, the existing maintenance building, which is located where my pointer is outside of the projected sea level rise. Additionally, the location of the new office building and the stormwater management BMPs, shown in this approximate location and approximately here, are also outside of the projected sea level rise areas. This coastal resiliency slide shows the Maryland Coast Smart mapping standard, which is called the Coast Smart Climate Ready Action Boundary, or the CS CRAB. A super simple explanation of the CS CRAB is that it is a vulnerability representation of sea level rise and storm surge. Kate Charbonneau and Emily Veneri will discuss the CS CRAB in greater detail after my presentation. So I just want to draw your attention to the fact that the existing maintenance building here and the proposed microbial retention area, which is located approximately where the laser pointer is, are within the CS CRAB, but the proposed new building, shown here, and the submerged gravel wetlands, which would be adjacent to it, are located outside of the CS CRAB. MDTA has reviewed the critical area climate resilience considerations, and due to vulnerability, MDTA is raising the first floor elevation of both the maintenance and office building structures, so they will be above the CS CRAB line. The office building as proposed will already be above the CS CRAB line, but MDTA is raising the first floor elevation an additional amount for future considerations. Wetland migration impacts are not anticipated, and the mitigation that is provided for the permanent buffer disturbance and the tree clearing that I discussed previously should provide additional resiliency to the forested area adjacent to the wetlands by the Bay Bridge Easy Pass Stop-In Center. Conditional approval is required for this project because the proposed permanent disturbance in the buffer is not water dependent. Other than the buffer disturbance, the proposed project conforms to the laws and regulations. The reconstruction of the maintenance building and the construction of the office building are required for staff working on upcoming long-term major capital projects at the Bay Bridge. The buffer disturbance will be mitigated at a 3-to-1 ratio, as I previously discussed. Public notice was published in the Capitol Gazette on December 22nd, 2020. A sign was posted along westbound US 301 and Old Ferry Slip Road, which changes into Oceanic Drive as you move slightly south. No comments were received. Staff recommends approval with the following conditions. Condition 1, within 30 days of approval, MDTA shall revise the proposed planting plan to provide an additional 347 square feet of planting for a total mitigation requirement of 17,147 square feet of planting and submit the plan to commission staff for review and approval. MDTA cannot use excess 10% credit to count towards 347 square feet of tree canopy mitigation. Number 2, prior to the start of construction, MDTA shall provide a completed revised planting agreement form and copies of all final approvals, such as stormwater management plans and erosion and sediment control plans, to commission staff. Does anyone have any questions?
Actually, I have a couple of comments and a couple of questions. That's okay.
Okay.
So one of the things that wasn't, I guess, noticeable in the exhibits that were shared in the presentation today wasn't really focusing on the ingress and egress to the new office building locations. So my question for, I guess, MDTA is, have you evaluated what is to be done during a storm event in terms of access to the buildings? Because it looks like the approach roads along, that lead into that site have the potential to be underwater, particularly during storm events. So was there made to that in your design, or do you have alternative plans to relocate staff if there's a condition where they can't actually access the building?
Good morning, Sandy. This is Ben Spencer representing MDTA. So through this project, there were considerations on the design side to change the roadway elevation in the surrounding areas to provide long-term access. But those changes were not elected to be implemented through this project. Currently, we're doing MDTA's analyzing the entire Bay Bridge facility for broader climate risks, including access roads to various facilities, including ones that are proposed for renovation under this contract, and plan to develop facility-wide plans in the coming year that will address all aspects of climate resiliency, including shifting roadway access as needed and having contingency plans as such. But nothing on this specific project was designed to address that point.
Okay. And then I had one more question related to the resiliency measures in terms of your building materials. I noticed that in the climate resiliency statement in the application, it was indicated that you would not be using steel beams and decking, but then later on in the application, it indicated that steel and metal buildings will be put in place. So I'm just wondering, how are you ensuring that the building materials that you're using are going to be, I guess, able to either withstand potential storm surge impacts or corrosive issues related to becoming wet occasionally? Was it just a inconsistency in the application itself, or is it something that you're still fleshing out the details for in terms of materials?
I believe that the materials have been adjusted to minimize risk through exposure to salt water or something through a flooding event. I think that's an inconsistency within the application, but certainly I can follow back up with the designers and confirm more specifically with the commission what materials were finally selected in that design and the related resiliency of such decisions.
Thank you. And I have one last comment, and it's related to the microbiome retention facility. Because it is in an area where there is likely going to be overtopping occasionally during storm events, I would just request that as you're picking your plant material, that you're mindful of picking species that can tolerate whatever the water might be. How brackish it is, I don't know, but in order to make sure that you actually have success in that planting area, I would ask that you review that as well.
I'll pass that on. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlotte, were there any other questions in the chat?
There do not appear to be. Commissioner McCall had the same question as your first question to MDTA, so that was it.
All right. Thank you. Well, at this point then, I would like to ask for a motion to approve as outlined by Kate Durant in her presentation and with the conditions as outlined.
So moved, Mayor Mahoney. Pat Mahoney.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mayor Mahoney.
Second. Second.
And who is providing
Curtis
the
Bueller.
second? Thank
Curtis
you,
Bueller.
Curtis. All right, and we are going to do the, I guess, move to a vote now, and I'm going to have Charlotte go through the attending commissioners to get their vote.
Okay. Commissioner Grant.
Aye.
Commissioner McCall.
Aye.
Commissioner McDowell.
Aye.
Commissioner McCarthy.
Aye.
Commissioner Parker.
Aye.
Commissioner Roberson.
Aye.
And then by phone, we have Commissioner Bueller.
Aye.
Commissioner Varney Alvarado.
Aye.
And is there anyone I missed?
You missed Mahoney, and I
Oh,
say
I'm sorry.
aye.
Commissioner Mahoney.
The maker of the motion. I'm only allowed to vote on this.
Oh, wait, am I supposed to vote too?
I guess so. Commissioner Hertz.
Aye. All right. Thank you, everybody. I know that some of the folks that are on the call were temporarily on the call from the agencies, but given the last project that we reviewed and Kate's mention of the co-smart requirements, if you have the ability to stay on the line and sit in on the presentation that Emily and Kate Charbonneau are going to give, I encourage you to do so. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Kate and Emily.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Hertz. This is Kate Charbonneau. Emily Veneri and I are going to do a quick presentation today to talk to you about the Maryland Co-Smart Construction Program. This is a separate program, obviously, from the Critical Area Commission, but there is some overlap in terms of some of the issues that both the Co-Smart Construction Program and the Co-Smart Council look at, as well as the coastal resiliency measures that you all look at on state development projects in the critical area. So we wanted to describe the program to you a little bit today, talk about the new mapping data layer that Kate referenced in her presentation, and share a little bit more about that, and then sort of provide some feedback on what the commission, the Critical Area Commission role is, and how that does relate to the Co-Smart Council roles. I'd like to introduce Allison Brettenother. She is with us today from Department of Natural Resources, and she is the DNR staff for the Co-Smart Council and has been leading the charge on updating the program this past year. And then I would also like to point out that both Sandy Hertz and myself are members of the Co-Smart Council. So Sandy, be prepared to answer any questions as we go through. And I will upload the presentation, and then Emily's going to kick it off if I can. If I can manage to figure out how to do that.
I am happy to start talking while you are figuring that out. Emily Vanieri, and also I have two hats in the game as well. I am counsel to the Co-Smart Council, as well as, of course, counsel to the Commission. So to start out with, I am going to just go, Kate and I are going to go through some of the who, what, where, when, why about the Co-Smart Council, and then Kate will follow up at the end with the interaction between the Co-Smart Council requirements and the critical area requirements. So
okay. I am sorry I'm having so many issues getting this to load up, but it's not showing up in my list of PowerPoint, so I'm just reopening.
Okay.
Of course, the first time I do a presentation, I can't manage to make it work. All right, let's try this one more time. No.
I'm fine without the presentation if you want to. I mean, I think we only need a couple of the slides for pictures.
Yes.
So I'll just keep going.
All right, keep going.
Yeah, no problem. So
And I
the
will-
CoSmart Council. The CoSmart Council has actually been around since 2014. It's established in statute. It is chaired by the DNR secretary, and it includes membership from the private sector, state agencies, and universities. What does the CoSmart Council do exactly? They have a number of responsibilities, but for our purposes today, I'm going to describe their main responsibility, which is to develop and adopt specific CoSmart siting and design criteria. And these criteria are supposed to be incorporated into specific state and local projects in order to address impacts from sea level rise, inundation, coastal flooding, and other climate change consequences. The other requirement is that the CoSmart Council is supposed to consult with the Department of Natural Resources and the Maryland Department of Transportation when they are developing these siting and design criteria. And then finally, they publish an actual document that incorporates and describes in detail the CoSmart construction program and those siting and design criteria. The first program was adopted in 2015. But there have been some changes to the law over these past 5 years, and with the biggest changes recently, they've done a major update for 2020, and that's what we're going to be focusing on mostly for today. Oh, go Kate. Oh, almost.
I know. It's like it suddenly showed up. Here we go.
There you go.
All right. So I think you did that one. So I'll go.
Yep. So
There we go.
keep going. Next one. Next one. There we go. All right, so what projects are subject to the CoSmart program? There is a list of criteria that has to be met in order for the project to be required to incorporate CoSmart siting and design criteria. This list is on the slide in front of you, but it has to be a capital project. It can be constructed by a state or local jurisdiction. It costs at least $500,000 and it's funded with at least 50% state funds. It can involve the construction or reconstruction of a structure, or which is defined in the law, or the construction of a highway facility. And then it's located within a vulnerable area as specified in the program. And that's what we were talking about earlier with the CS CRAB, the CoSmart Climate Ready Action Boundary. Even if the project is not in a vulnerable area, state and local capital projects are expected to comply with the CoSmart program as much as possible. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kate.
Okay, thank you, Emily. So in determining what are vulnerable areas, this has been a measure that has changed over time since the CoSmart program was first adopted, just due to certain legislative amendments. And so this year, 2020, the CoSmart Council formally adopted the CoSmart Action Boundary, or the CS CRAB. And what this boundary does is it gives a definitive area whereby we can expect both sea level rise in the future as well as storm surge events on top of that sea level rise in the future, which was one of the legislative amendments that happened in 2018. So the measure that the CoSmart Council selected was to go back to the 100-year base flood elevation, which is a defined boundary for the state of Maryland. So in coastal areas, that 100-year base flood elevation plus 3 feet in terms of a rise in vertical extent, that is sort of the fixed elevation of where the CS CRAB elevation comes into play. And then there's a corresponding horizontal floodplain. So what that looks like is shown here on this slide, that we have the 100-year base flood elevation. So below that, there are obviously Maryland floodplain regulations come into play. But above that, the Coastmark Council decided to add a 3-foot vertical extent and then draw that out onto the land to give us really this new mapped boundary as to where the CS crab and the Coastmark siting and design guidelines would apply. So in terms of how that looks on the land from a bird's eye view, going back to Kate's project earlier, and to the point that Commissioner Hertz was making, here we have, again, the MDTA facility that exists, and it is within that CS crab boundary. And so the idea is that in the future, during a storm event, when we have sea levels have risen, there could be some flooding up to about a foot within that area. And so what MDTA has done is they've risen the elevation of that building so that it is above that CS crab elevation. But as you can also see, the access road to this facility is something that MDTA will need to take into consideration for future planning because it might be subject to flooding during storm events in the future. Okay, I'll hand it on back to Emily.
Thank you. So what exactly are the CoastSmart program requirements? What this really means is that projects that meet that set of applicability that I talked about earlier have to incorporate siting and design criteria into their projects. So what are these siting and design criteria? Siting criteria is where something's constructed, and then design criteria means how something is constructed. So an example of the siting criteria is that a project should first and foremost try to avoid being constructed within that CS crab boundary. Another example of a siting criteria is to protect and maintain existing natural and nature-based features that buffer the project from sea level rise, inundation, coastal flooding, or storm surge. For design criteria, how something is constructed, an example of that is, like Kate mentioned earlier, raising a building, raising the first floor elevation of the structure so that it's at or above that CS crab elevation. And then also choosing appropriate building materials to withstand flooding potential. Within these lists of siting and design criteria, there's also some stricter requirements for critical and essential facilities that may be constructed in or near the CS crab boundary. You can go to the next slide. You might be wondering how the CoastSmart program is implemented. It's very different from the way that the critical area program is administered. So for the CoastSmart program, each agency actually has to incorporate these siting and design criteria into their own programs and policies. So it's basically a self-certifying program. The CoastSmart Council does not review and approve individual projects. What the CoastSmart Council does is set these minimum thresholds for the siting and design criteria. An agency may request waivers from those siting or design criteria, and an agency may also qualify for something called a categorical exemption. But in either circumstance, whether it's a waiver or an exemption, the agency still must demonstrate that they are incorporating adaptation and resilience features to the maximum extent practicable. One of the ways, sorry, Kate, I'll just go back for 1 second. It's not on the slide, but one of the ways that agencies can do this is they fill out something called a project screening form that the CoastSmart Council has developed. And Kate will talk a little bit more about that later, but that's one of the ways that they can demonstrate that they have incorporated these features into their projects. All done.
Okay, thank you. So there is obviously, as you would expect, some overlap between projects that are done by state agencies that have to meet the CoastSmart construction program, and because they are within the critical area, will need to address the Critical Area Commission's regulations for climate resiliency. And just as a reminder, in all state agencies under our regulations have to consult with the Commission as soon as possible regarding an assessment of proposed state development projects for climate resilient practices that address coastal hazards, extreme weather events, sea level rise, and other impacts. So I look at it as all projects have to do critical area coastal resiliency, and of that, a smaller subset may be required to meet CoSmart construction program requirements depending upon their applicability. So one way we try to bring that information to you all is we have a checklist, which is different from the form that the CoSmart Council uses, but we have a state agency development checklist and a local agency development checklist on our website. But because our regulations only apply to state development projects, in that checklist, we have the requirements related to coastal resiliency. So we ask for projects to include a short summary statement that describe how climate resilience factors have been considered during the project siting and design. And then we also ask for information, and we give various mapping resources, including Maryland Coastal Atlas mapping data, to show, okay, what are the potential threats? So sea level rise, storm surge data, shoreline erosion data, information like that. Now with the CS CRAB data, which should be finalized and available on the state GIS mapping system, that may also be used as an assessment tool. And then if the CoSmart construction program is applicable, we ask that they provide information that they would have developed as a part of that program. So the project screening form that the CoSmart Council has available for applicants to fill out, that can be included. If they're seeking a waiver from the CoSmart, well, we won't even go into the waiver process, but if they are seeking a waiver, which there is a formal process for how to do that, they can include that information just to help demonstrate, that they've received a waiver and they might be located within the CS CRAB, or they might be not complying with all of those requirements fully, but there are certain reasons for why that's happening. And so if that information is submitted, then what happens is we put all of that information into the staff report. So I just wanted to cover, the specific coastal resilience criteria that you as a commissioner are looking at. And really there are about 5 different criteria within COMAR for state agencies that relate to coastal resilience. These first 2 do overlap with really the CoSmart construction program. So if a project is applies for CoSmart construction, then the information they're submitting to us will answer these first 2 criteria, which is demonstrating to the commission, you all, that they've considered the likelihood of sea level rise over the course of the design life of the development, and then also that they've included different climate resilient practices to either avoid or minimize impacts. But the commission has 3 additional criteria that are not explicitly part of the CoSmart construction program. In addition, just as a reminder, these criteria apply to all state development projects. And so we're also looking for information about potential impacts to wetland migration areas within the area of the development project and adjacent to the area of the development project. If there are impacts to those wetland migration areas, then we are asking for the agency to provide information about why that impact is unavoidable, and then an assessment of other ecological features on site that could be enhanced, restored, or created in order to maintain existing wetland functions. And then we are also looking for recommendations regarding the most feasible methods to address that impact. And then finally, a large number of projects that the commission does look at relate to public access to waterways. And when these regulations and criteria were developed and approved by you all, by this body, it was important that we maintain a consideration for public access. And so if it is a public access feature, then the agency must demonstrate the location of the project will minimize impacts from sea level rise, and that long-term access has been considered for the public. So those sort of final 3 criteria, again, do not overlap with the CoSmart construction program. So if we are looking at a project that does have to comply, we are also asking for this additional information to be provided. So what is your role in terms of, I mean, your role is related and specific to the Critical Area Commission's criteria under COMAR 270205. So our focus is going to be on the potential impacts over the lifetime of a project, consideration of any activities or actions that might minimize those impacts, a review of any wetland migration areas and whether or not those will be impacted and whether any other ecological measures could be undertaken that might increase resiliency of a site. And again, the long-term public access. And so what the staff is doing is they're taking that information on every project they present to you that's a state agency project, including it within their staff report, but they will call out if a CoSmart construction or a CoSmart council, I'm just losing my words right here. If the CoSmart construction program does apply to a project, they will call out that information as well, just so that you're clear and that you have it all. Okay, so that was a very, sorry for the technical difficulties there, but are there any questions at this point related to either the CoSmart Council and their role or the Critical Area Commission's requirements for coastal resiliency?
I don't have a question, but I do want to point out that for the commissioners, that the MDTA project that we reviewed and voted on today was aware of the CoSmart construction applicability, and they did provide a completed project screening form as part of their application to the Critical Area Commission. So it was already being implemented. For those that, I don't know if we actually mentioned this, I might have been figuring out how to get from my iPad to my laptop at that point, but the rules requiring CoSmart construction applicability became effective, I believe it was in October of last year. So it's a relatively new additional consideration for state development projects and for folks to consider, particularly if they're working on highways, because that was a big change from the previous regulations. So, and then I also just wanted to point out that you know, we will see a lot of projects, I believe, that will have both CoSmart and Critical Area Commission requirements. When state development projects are being considered, they may fall out of the current critical area mapped boundaries. So what I'm expecting to see, because like Kate mentioned earlier, Kate, Emily, and I all wear the same multiple hats when it comes to CoSmart Council and the Critical Area Commission. And so just for a point of interest for developers and the consultants that are on this call, just because you do not fall within the Critical Area Commission boundary, the mapped boundaries right now, you will still need to check to see if you fall within the CS CRAB boundary, because there is an applicability there that wasn't there previously, and we just want you to be aware of it. So I believe that the instance of one area applying versus both areas applying will be more on the line of CRAB applying and not critical area applying and the other not. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just wanted to point that out. Do you agree with that, Emily?
I definitely understand what you're saying. I don't have a good sense of, yes, I agree, but I don't have a good sense of what, you know, how it's actually going to play out. Yeah. I wish I did.
Mm-hmm. I know, me too. Were there any questions from any of the commissioners or anyone on the call today? All right. Well, with that, I am going to say we are adjourned until this afternoon at 1 p.m. when we have the full commission meeting. Thank you all for joining us this morning, and thank you for your presentations.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.